Sergeant Arms will please secure the chamber doors. Members, please take your seats. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. President.
All right, Senators, we are very pleased to have Pastor Paul Johnson, Sr. from God's Church of Grace and Mercy in Baltimore, Maryland, guest of the distinguished senator from the 45th District. Please rise for the invocation.
It's an honor and a pleasure to be here this morning, giving honor to Senator President Ferguson, Senator McCray, all the senators here in the Senate of Chambers, and the support staff. At this time, we'll go into prayer. God, we come before you, asking you to continue to bless the Senate with wisdom, knowledge, and peace. God, give them divine guidance as they make decisions on behalf of the communities they serve. Let them consult you, just like the leaders of old. They sought you out, talked with you, walked with you with prior to making a decision. Let these leaders' heart be open to you, so their hearts are open for your people and their needs, problems, and improved quality of life. Let everyone under the sound of my voice be strong, very courageous, staying on one accord as one body, and vote for the good of all people. Give them the heart of King David, who was the apple of God's eye. Let the Senate be leaders after God's own heart, whom you are well pleased. Comfort the leaders when they are in need of direction. Put your angels around them when they call upon you. Let this house be known to represent God in all that they do and say. Give them peace and unity with one another so they can spread peace and unity beyond these walls. God, there are many members here, but one body working for the state of Maryland to represent your people. Give them great success, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Well said. Thank you. Chair recognizes the senator from the 45th District.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just want to take the time out to recognize Pastor Paul Johnson and the work that he's doing in East Baltimore and say thank you from that standpoint. Mr. President, Pastor Johnson isn't just here today, but I believe that he's also joined by his wife of 34 years, Ms. Terry Johnson, and would also like to recognize her. If we could just give a round rising of applause. Thank you, Mr. President.
Welcome, welcome. And without objection, certainly we will journalize the pastor's invocation this morning, and thank you for being here with us. Thank you. All right, has everyone recorded their presence in the chamber? If so, the clerk will take the call. With 45 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland is now in session. We have let's see, who do we have for the volleyball team? Chair recognizes the senator from District 1. They had a long drive this morning.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, please welcome the Clear Spring volleyball team, the Lady Blazers, who won the 1A class state championship against South Carroll at Hartford Community College. The Blazers claimed their 4th championship in program history and first since 2018. With their biggest win in Clear Spring High School volleyball, not far from their minds are the 3 Clear Spring athletes who tragically lost their lives in August of 2022 in a car accident. May their memory be forever in our hearts. Let's congratulate them, colleagues, please.
The clerk will read the resolution.
Be it hereby known to all that the Senate of Maryland offers its sincerest congratulations to the Clear Spring High School girls volleyball team in recognition of winning the Class 1A Maryland State Volleyball Championship. We applaud your outstanding season and wish you more. Congratulations. The entire membership extends its best wishes on this memorable occasion and directs this resolution be presented on this 15th day of March, 2023.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President.
Has everyone recorded their vote? If so, the clerk will take the call. Ladies, with the Clear Spring High School girls volleyball team, the Senate of Maryland unanimously celebrates your victory and congratulates you on your 1A State Volleyball Championship. Congratulations. We are honored by your presence. Have a wonderful, wonderful trip here and hopefully a nice drive back. Yes. I know it was a little bit of a hike. All right, we have, let's see, the senator from the 23rd District. Do we have a resolution today?
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. Today's recognition is important as we celebrate the 50th anniversary of Title IX. The Bowie State University women's bowling team capped a dominant two-day run in the CIAA Bowling Championship in Salem, Virginia, defeating Fayetteville State for their sixth straight CIAA championship for their 2022 season. Player Kayla Snowden received Food Lion's Most Valuable Player for her outstanding contributions, and head coach Andrew Campbell was named the 2021-2022 Women's Bowling Coach of the Year. Each Bowie State coach and team member received a trophy after winning this title, but I want to acknowledge that this women's bowling team is the 10-time CIAA champions. The championship team members are Sydney Tabor, Paris Anthony, Jessica Watts, Olivia Watts, Jayla Gray, Afrusia Gentle, Kayla Snowden, and Takara Wigfall. And I am pleased to provide a resolution on their behalf, Mr. President.
Clerk will read the resolution in full.
Be it hereby known to all that the Senate of Maryland offers its sincerest congratulations to Bowie State University women's bowling team in recognition of your winning the CIAA Division Championship. We applaud your outstanding season and wish you many more. Congratulations. The entire membership extends its best wishes on this memorable occasion and directs this resolution be presented on this 15th day of March, 2023.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? If so, the clerk will take the call. To the ladies of the Bowie State University women's bowling team, congratulations on your dominant 10-time CIAA Division Championship. Congratulations. Is that a personalized bowling ball? Wow. Look at that. Chair recognizes the senator from the 27th District.
And Mr. President and members of the body, we'd also like to, even though she's walked out of the room, the president of Bowie State University, Dr. Marina Bro. So great job, Senator from 23rd District.
Excellent, excellent. President Bro's doing a wonderful job. She's a great state leader, doing really, really great work. All right. Yes, Chair recognizes the senator from the capital city.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Colleagues, we're joined by a group of students from Annapolis High School in the gallery above me. They're part of a signature program called Change Engineering, where they're working on learning how to change the world. And I think today is going to be hopefully a great example. I know there's some hot topics on the agenda today, so I just ask the colleagues to give them a warm Senate welcome.
Welcome,
Thank you.
welcome. We need your work these days. Welcome. All right. Yes, Chair recognizes Senator from Howard and Anne Arundel counties.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to welcome the Doctor of the Day. We have Dr. Marie Albert Lucico, who's here from Howard County, practices at Crossroads Medical Associates in internal medicine. Welcome.
Wonderful. Welcome. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you. Chair recognizes Senator from Montgomery County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today I'm joined by a constituent from my legislative district. Her name is Shruti Bhatnagar. Shruti is a civic leader, a precinct official, and an environmental champion who's come to watch us here today. Welcome,
Wonderful.
Shruti.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. Additional introductions. Any notes before we start? We do have another special day today. Our first lieutenant? First lieutenant? Is that right? First sergeant. Just so happens to be March is Trooper Birthday month, and it is Steph Bojowski's birthday today. Happy birthday. We had to come up with a lie to figure out how to make sure she could be on the floor this morning, so she did not think that was going to happen. So welcome to the glad we could celebrate this special day with you. All right, excellent. Any further business before we jump in today? If not, without objection, we will waive the reading of the journal from the prior legislative day. We have a message. Well, let's do the message from the House first. This is number 11. Clerk will read the bills.
House Bill 18, Delegate Hill, Maryland General and Limited Power of Attorney Act alterations, judicial proceedings. House Bill 162,
Majority Leader
Delegate
moves so
Moon.
we consider the reading of the bills. They will be referred to their appropriate standing committee. We have a message to the Senate from the City of Baltimore. The clerk will read the message.
Dear President Ferguson, please accept this letter as notice of my formal appointment of Justin Williams to serve as a member of the Maryland Stadium Authority. Upon his confirmation by the Senate, he will replace Mr. Michael Huber, who I've asked to resign because he's no longer affiliated with my administration. Mr. Huber was serving a term of 4 years beginning on April 21st, 2021. Mr. Williams currently serves as Deputy Mayor for Community and Economic Development and is tasked with executing my vision for equitable growth in the City of Baltimore. Prior to public service, he was served as a partner with the Baltimore-based law firm Rosenberg Martin Greenberg, where he focused on land use and zoning matters. I'm confident that his experience both inside and outside government make him well positioned to make valuable contributions to the Maryland Stadium Authority. If you have any questions or need further information, please contact the Mayor's Office of Government Relations. In partnership, Brandon M. Scott, Mayor, Baltimore City.
All right, message having been read is ordered journalized. We have a message from the executive. Clerk will read the message.
Dear Mr. President, in accordance with Article 2, Section 13 of the Constitution of Maryland, I am pleased to submit the following Cabinet Secretary appointment nomination for confirmation by the Maryland State Senate. Superintendent of Maryland State Police, Lieutenant Colonel Roland L. Butler, Jr. The individual brings both excellence and equity to the office which he has been nominated. I'm confident he will provide the strength of expertise and leadership to instill confidence across our communities, make state government work for all of our citizens, and leave no one in Maryland behind. I look forward to your favorable approval of this nominee and thank you for your partnership. Sincerely, Wes Moore, Governor.
Message having been read is ordered journalized. Unfortunately, since we've received this so late, we're probably not going to be able to schedule a hearing for this one until at least the 27th. So it's just we'll take up this nominee on the 27th at the earliest. All right. Let's see. We've got a report from the Committee on Rules. Clerk will read the report.
Senate Bill 879, Senator Rosa Pepp, Job Help for All to Budget and Taxation. Senate Bill 889, Senator
All
McCray.
right. Majority Leader moves so be considered the reading of the bills. They will be re-referred to their appropriate standing committees. We have a layover calendar. This is calendar number 16. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 111, Senator Kagan, Election Law, Campaign Finance, Draft Committees, and Exploratory Committees. Question is on the adoption of the 3 committee amendments in the favorable report.
All right. Question is on the three committee amendments. Chair recognizes the Minority Whip on the amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I was just wanting to be sure if I could maybe ask the floor leader one final clarifying question.
Floor leader yield. Pearso, Senator may proceed.
Of course.
Just making sure. So you'll be reporting on the same timelines if you have a draft campaign or if someone has a draft campaign. You'll be reporting the same timelines as we do with our finance reports as state elected officials and candidates, correct?
That's correct, but without contribution limits the way we face.
And then finally, do we have to, with a draft campaign, right now, can people hold on to the money if we don't have this bill, or can they not? Does this bill change what you had to do if you had, not a draft, I'm sorry, and I'm thinking more exploratory than draft, but an exploratory committee?
It's a big loophole. There's no guidelines at all. So this indicates what you can spend money on legally. I mean, today, hypothetically, somebody could use the money for a draft or exploratory and go take a great trip to Aruba.
Right.
And it wouldn't be disclosed and it wouldn't be prohibited. This says what you can spend the money on, that it has to be disclosed, and then after you either declare that you're not going to be a candidate, you have 120 days to dissolve the committee and disclose and give as I said yesterday, distribute any leftover money to one of 4 places.
And you are not able to transfer money from an exploratory committee to a regular committee.
To the maximum allowed by law.
So you could do the 6,000.
You could do the 6,000,
yeah,
but
okay.
you can't. If there's a lot more, you have to give it pro rata back to the donors, to the state or local party, to a nonprofit of your choice, or to the Fair Campaign Fund.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President. I think my questions are answered.
Thank you, Senator. All right. On the committee amendments, any further discussion? Any objection to the committee amendments? Without objection, the 3 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 111 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Let's go ahead and do we have a report from the Committee on Finance. This is number 16. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 381, Senator M. Washington, Baltimore City Alcoholic Beverages Class A7 licenses, favorable.
Chair recognizes the senator from Baltimore City as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 381 repeals the prohibition against the Baltimore City Board of Liquor Commissioners from issuing a Class A7 beer, wine, and liquor license in the 43rd Legislative District. The bill also authorizes the board to issue a Class A7 license after June 30th, 2022. There are no amendments. There is no fiscal impact. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move for adoption of a favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. On the report, any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 381 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 574, Senator Lewis Young, State Employee Rights and Protections, Personal Actions and Harassment Complaints, favorable.
Chair recognizes the senator from Howard County as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 574 increases the time that a state employee in the executive branch or an applicant to the executive branch agency may file a complaint alleging that political affiliation, belief, opinion, or other non-merit factors were used in an employment decision. The bill also expressly allows a state employee or an applicant in the executive branch agency to file a complaint that alleges harassment as defined under Title 20 of the state government article by an employer and requires such a complaint to be filed within 2 years consistent with that title after the alleged violation has occurred. There are no committee amendments. There is no opposition. Move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. On the report, any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 574 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 765, Senator Carter, Baltimore City Alcoholic Beverages Class A7 beer, wine, and liquor licenses, favorable.
Chair recognizes the senator from Baltimore City as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 765 authorized the Baltimore City Board of Liquor License Commissioners to exchange a Class BD7 beer, wine, and liquor license for the premises located on a certain section of Frederick Avenue for a Class A7 beer, wine, and liquor license. There are no amendments, there's no fiscal impact, and there was no opposition at the committee. And I believe I'd like to defer to the senator from the 41st District.
All right, Chair recognizes the senator from the 41st.
Thank you, Mr. President. There's an amendment that apparently didn't make its way to the floor, so I'd like to special order it for purposes of a sponsor-friendly amendment. Thank you.
Excellent. All right, senator has moved to special order the bill until the appropriate time tomorrow. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 828, Senator Hayes, Family and Medical Leave Insurance Program modifications, favorable with 5 amendments.
Chair recognizes the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, Senate Bill 828 modifies last year enacted Family and Medical Leave Insurance Program by altering key administrative deadlines, technical definitions, and components of the program's administration. The bill extends the dates regarding the employer-employee contributions and the beginning of benefit payments to covered individuals and other related implementation dates. Because of the time extensions, corrections are made. The processing regarding program implementation in the modified Senate language from last year is restored. Amendments number 1 and 2 are technical and clarifying. They restored a 5-day employer notification process. This was requested by the department, of course. Restore the original language regarding program benefits for a covered individual's serious health condition and set the employer-employee share of an employee's contribution at 50%. Amendment number 3 establishes a cap of 1.2% on the total amount of an employee's contributions. The bill further extends the dates regarding employee contributions to October 1st, 2024, and the beginning of the benefit payments to be covered individuals January 1st, 2026, and other related implementation dates. Amendments number 4 and 5 are technical, alter a definition, strike a funding requirement, clarify the process for reimbursing specified state-funded community providers, and specify that participating insurers have a certificate issued by the insurance commissioner and require the Maryland Department of Labor to promulgate regulations. I move the amendments and the adoption of a favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 5 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, chair recognizes the minority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. The floor leader yield, please.
Senator may proceed.
Yes.
Just respect to the amendments that were offered. One of the important things I think that there was going into, again, this is a result of last year's legislation that we put the framework together for this. This came back with some details on it. One of the things that was not done last year was done this year was the contribution cap that we decided on, and we made that at 1.2%, right?
That's correct. Over the interim and leading through this legislative process, we have been in conversation with several of the stakeholders. Many of the stakeholders had concern about having a cap in place. And what we arrived to and what's in the bill before you with the amendments is a 1.2% cap.
1.2%. And the other framework we set up was how the employer and employee contributions, the percentages of those would take place. And it could have either been somewhere between 75% employer, 25% employee, or 25 or 75% employee, 25% employer. This bill settled on 50-50?
Yes. The split is 50-50, which puts us in the same posture as the House bill.
As the House bill. Okay. And then finally, I know that this wasn't necessarily addressed this year, but was in the bill last year with respect to seasonal employees. And there being some concern, I think that I think it was like 17 hours a week. If an individual works 17 hours a week, that they would then be able to participate in this program and then thus be able to potentially get benefits on what would be outside the normal season that we saw seasonal employees. That wasn't addressed any further in this legislation, right? In any of the updates that we did here?
So the bill before you with the amendments, so seasonal employees are covered to the extent that they work 680 hours within a 12-month period. 680 hours are the equivalent to 40-hour work weeks up to 17 weeks.
17 weeks. Okay, my apologies. So 17 weeks. If you worked 40 hours a week for about 17 weeks, you would be able to be in this program.
Correct.
Right. The concern then became, are you then taking paid leave outside of what the normal seasonal or what the normal season would be? And I don't think we addressed that any further this year, right?
Correct. And so the idea, you may work a seasonal job in one place, but then you also work some other hours. So it doesn't matter if you stay in that one job, as long as you have a cumulative of 680 hours within a 12-month period, you will qualify for the insurance program.
Okay, that's good. All right, I appreciate your responses. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thank you, Senator. Further discussion on the 5 amendments? Any further discussion? Any objection to the 5 committee amendments? Without objection, the 5 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 828 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill. Oh, I'm sorry. That's the end of that report, isn't it? Let's go to Education, Energy, and the Environment. This is number 19. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 143, Senator Feldman, Electricity Net Engineering Metering Accrual of Net Excess Generation Net Metering Flexibility Act, favorable to amendments.
Chair recognizes the chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill authorizes an eligible customer generator on our very successful net metering law that we've had in place for a long time to accrue and carry over excess generation for an indefinite period instead of under current law they're limited to this certain very limited 12-month April to April period. So under this bill they'll be able to carry over excess generation into future billing periods. The existing there are 2 committee amendments. Amendment number 1 makes technical changes. Amendment number 2 keeps the 12-month billing period in place. That's an option. But for the other option under the bill, the net excess generation, which extends to net metering, we're extending that also to community solar pilot programs. The bill exempts electric co-ops and municipalities from this carryover provision because of the IT costs involved for some of the smaller, again, munis and co-ops. And then the timeline for indefinite generation in terms of when those accounts are closed up, what amount is of that excess goes back to the customer. That's going to be determined by the Public Service Commission to calculate that. So with that, Mr. President, there's no fiscal impact. The bill passed unanimously. I'd move for the adoption for the favorable committee report and the 2 amendments.
All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objection to the 2 committee amendments? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 143 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 346, Senator King, Maryland Sign Language Interpreters Act, favorable to amendments.
Chair recognizes the senator from Frederick City as the floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. This bill establishes the Maryland Signed Language Interpreters Act. It establishes a regulatory framework for licensure of individuals who provide sign language interpretation services for the state. The State Board of Sign Language Interpreters is established in the Office of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. The bill further establishes a timeline for implementation as well as termination. There are 2 committee amendments. One just makes technical changes. The second requires the Office of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing to include in its annual report a report on the activities of the board, including the number of licensed signed language and interpreters and the number of complaints received, differentiated by the type of complaints. It further requires that the Maryland Judiciary submits a report to the committee on its use of interpreters for 3 years beginning January 1st, 2026. The committee unanimously approved the fiscal note, and I move for approval of the amendments as well as the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 346 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 551, the President Education Service Year Option Program Establishment, Serving Every Region Through Vocational Exploration Act of 2023, favorable of 3 amendments.
Chair recognizes the senator from Baltimore City and County as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 551 is truly the process that what we have before us is truly a process of this committee, of the EE committee, but also I would say that we should see the bill before us as a document that is produced by all of us. As amended, this bill does the following. It further codifies the Department of Service and Civic Innovation and making it consistent with other departments. It creates actually 2 tracks for service, career, and job exploration. First, it creates a young adult service year option pathway. That is a year-long placement for recent high school graduates. And then it also creates the Maryland Service Year pathway. Both are paid $15 an hour for the work that they complete during their placement. Also, at the completion of their placement, they receive a $6,000 award that they may use as they choose. There will also be yearly reports about the progress on a number of dimensions. And fourth, there will also be a formal evaluation contracted with an external entity. Why I say, before I present the amendments, I will say that the bill before you, we considered a number of different components of what would make a successful transformational program. We have the opportunity, we see in this legislation, to change the lives of at least 200 young people in its first year. But when we think about the program in outgoing years, it will literally transform the life and opportunities for thousands of young Marylanders. We considered what actually is the service year option, filling that out, thinking about what types of things will be provided. We also considered the structure of not only the newly created department underneath the executive order that is now law. We considered the structure of that. We also further built out what the participants would look like, ensuring that we maintain the initial desire of our executive to have a very specific program for young people recently graduated, but also recognizing through the creation of our Maryland Core program that we created last year, 2 years ago, that there's also a need for others. We also contemplated what the outreach would look like, and also what services and what types of placements would be in the best interests of our state and our young people. As I said, there were lots of people in this body that had opinions about this and really good feedback. Every single committee is represented in this product before you. The First Amendment makes a technical change to the title of the bill. The Second Amendment establishes the Department of Services and Civic Engagement, and it alters the Maryland Core program. It adds, as I said, the young adult service option and the Maryland Service Year option. It requires the department to administer and manage the program, and it repeals the executive director position. It changes the board of directors to be the Maryland Core Program Advisory Board. And in this board, there's an opportunity not only to have individuals that were originally contemplated, but how do we extend and get the experiences of individuals who have workforce development, who are familiar with the regional job needs in our state, and have experience working with young people and the necessary wraparound services that they would need to successfully create a program such as this. It alters the duties of the department relating to the program. We wanted to very clearly clarify what the relationship was. Again, as I said, it adds additional eligibility criteria, program participation targets. There was an opportunity to make sure that the program is available to everyone, regardless of language, regardless of region, regardless of any of the various statuses that we typically contemplate in such legislation. It reorganizes the existing Maryland Core program And as I said, it requires a report, annual report, and it adds metrics that must be evaluated by both us as a body, but also as a private entity, a third-party private entity that in its third year of operation, we will get a very complete analysis of what is working and how to go forward. The Third Amendment provides for the expiration of the terms of the initial members of the Maryland Corps. It strikes the executive date and makes this an emergency legislation. Mr. President, I move for the adoption of the committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor Leader moves for the adoption of the 3 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Chair recognizes the Minority Leader on the amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. If the floor leader would yield for questions on the amendments, please.
Senator may proceed.
I noticed 39 pages of amendments. Accurate? Okay. One of the big issues that we had talked about before was the executive order that was put into place. It was since, I guess, has gone through on Friday. We didn't bring that up too much on Friday, but I guess we could have, but we knew this was coming. Yeah. So tell us what you did with respect to the executive order and standing up the department in this legislation.
Thank you for that question, and thank you for raising it. So what we did was, first of all, in code, we moved everything into state government, and so making it very clear that this is a principal department, and so then it would have all the responsibilities and obligations of every other secretary. So while the language is repeated in the bill, this language actually occurs elsewhere in code when each department was established. So
So we put the establishment of the department in this bill. In this bill now.
Yes.
Okay, great. And then just there's, as you mentioned, there was the Maryland Corps program, and now the service year program. Explain how they're different.
Basically, the main difference is that as the bill came in, it was very important that there be a special opportunity for young people just out of high school. They wanted a narrow band of participants. The philosophy behind that is that it's easier to create a cohort, right? So a smaller year band for that service year. The other one isn't as restrictive in terms of age. So you can be a recent high school graduate, you could be in your 20s, you could be someone wanting an opportunity to do additional work. So it doesn't have that sort of age restriction. So that's the 2 main differences.
Okay, and then with respect to the service year program, you mentioned opportunities. What does this foresee as those opportunities being?
Again, we're very careful about making sure that we weren't usurping the power of the department to create the program, right? We struggle with that at times, like we are to set the policies. So the specific, we beyond being paid $15 an hour, beyond maintaining the minimum amount of hours, the placements are focused in the areas that were identified as need in our state. So one, for example, is in the area of healthcare. Another is in the area of climate mitigation. Another is an area of public health and community and public health. So these brought and state government, making sure that there's an opportunity to maybe place some young people or young adults in a placement that could turn into a state job.
So is that the goal is to become a state job in a sense? Are there private sector employers participating in this, or is it just state?
Absolutely.
Right.
There are opportunities for placements, and anyone who is able to provide meaningful, structured work and service experience for our young people.
Okay, and then when you mentioned at $15 an hour, are the businesses or employers compensated for this or reimbursed for this? No. So it's just more the placement of these individuals within these different opportunities.
Yeah, and then there's costs that we'll incur. So it's sort of a cost sharing. So when you're placing young people in these positions, they require support that costs money. So we're partnering. If an entity is able to provide the $15 an hour, then we're able to provide the wraparound services. I could imagine, however, if down the road or as they further build out the program, perhaps there could be grants for entities as well. There is a provision, I believe, to allow some nonprofits to become regional program leaders. So I believe that there's some opportunity for that.
So with respect to the costs of this, there's been, I've seen a few different numbers. $9.2 million, is that a number that we've seen, or $13.7 million for the cost of implementing this? Is that accurate, or what have we seen?
I think I need to check that.
The Maryland Service Corps pathway already has a mandatory appropriation.
There we go, that's right. We already have a mandatory appropriation that's already in the bill. That's unchanged. So in this legislation, there isn't any additional that was already passed in prior years. So we didn't change the appropriation.
Through the Maryland Corps project?
However,
program?
the budget has $13 million
13?
for FY24.
13 million?
Yes.
So we said?
Yes.
Okay. And that money goes, again, to implement it, to stand up this department?
To stand up the program, to implement the program, to advertise. We also have information about advertising the program. So all of that gets. Also remember, Senator, you should remember that the department is coming by moving our Department of Government Services and Volunteerism into this service year, that there's federal dollars associated with that program that's also being utilized as well.
Okay.
So, for example, AmeriCorps and other entities. So that's quite a lot of money that's there. That's part of that $19 million.
All right. Just two more questions, if I could. You mentioned wraparound services.
Yes.
And this program prioritizes organizations that embrace the wraparound services for these individuals.
Well, we have a list of priorities that want to make sure that the jobs are family wage jobs, that there's an opportunity for growth in the company, making sure that it's in a sector of need in the state of Maryland. And so one of the things that we're encouraging the department to look at is the ability of the placement to either partner with someone who's able to support those wraparound services, whether it's transportation or some workforce development and things that young people tend to need, or that they themselves have that ability internally. So, for example, there is an energy company, a very large energy company, and they have a workforce component. I didn't know about this, and so we would probably, or the department would probably be very comfortable placing them in this for-profit energy distributor, because they, in addition to offering this potential well-paying job, there's also an opportunity that the young person will be successful, because we have people on site or a part of the program that know what it takes to run these types of initiatives.
Okay, and then I did promise two questions, so final question.
Oh, that's okay.
This program is supposed to start this upcoming academic year.
Well, as soon as you vote for it, it's an emergency bill. We'll go in, and the department will be able to get started.
Right, but as far as getting participants, we're looking at this academic year.
Right.
I think the goal was 200 participants in the first year.
Right.
Did the department or the representatives of this would-be departments say that that's realistic, that they can get this up and running and have an efficient program by the August, September?
And I see where you're coming from. We were very tempted to get into that level of detail, but what we believe we've created by filling out the, really codifying the department, its relationship with other departments, exactly what's going to happen in the service year, supporting, giving the policy around it, that is up to them. But we do believe, and I and others have experience with these types of programs, 200 in the first year is very doable.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
your responses. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All right, on the amendments, any further discussion? Any objections to the tiny little amendments? Without objection, the committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 551 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 663, Senator Feldman, Investor-Owned Electric Companies, Clean Energy Homes Pilot Programs Establishment, Maryland Resilient and Clean Energy Homes Act. Favorable to amendments.
Chair recognizes the chair of the committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just by way of a little background, we're obviously in the midst of a major transition where electrification of our homes is a huge issue in the nation. Here's a statistic. Up to 48 million existing U.S. family homes are going to need to be upgraded in terms of their electric, fully transition from fossil fuels and use electricity in their homes. It's not just for electric vehicle charging, it's also for space, water heating, cooking, and all kinds of other applications. But at the same time, what we're dealing with is the sort of the cost associated with doing these upgrades. They present a huge financial burden for us to get from where we are now to where we want to be. So what we're doing with this piece of legislation, Senate Bill 663, is we're establishing a pilot program that will require utilities to work in collaboration with customers, with the Public Service Commission, a pilot program, create programs which address, again, most significant upfront financial barriers to residential electrification. That is the cost of installing the needed electric panel upgrades, et cetera. So under the pilot, Maryland residents are going to receive incentives to engage in these load management programs, have to get approved. These programs have to go through the Public Service Commission for approval. We're talking about residential battery storage, on-site clean energy systems. This is a pretty novel idea with a lot of collaboration and cooperation. So specifically, as introduced, the bill requires each electric company by January 1st, 2024, although we are extending some of the timelines here, to file with the Public Service Commission an application for approval of a 3-year pilot program to support residential customer adoption of beneficial electrification measures. The PSC, Public Service Commission, has 90 days to take action on each of those applications. The bill does not apply to municipal electric utilities or electric cooperatives. There are 2 committee amendments, Mr. President. Amendment number 1 makes technical changes. Amendment number 2 delays the development and implementation of the pilot program. So these plans, instead of January 1, 2024, as introduced, are due from the utilities by January 2025. Modifies the scope of meter collar adapter use, requires electric companies to test those adapters, requires the Public Service to consider rates, cost effectiveness, environmental impacts as part of its review of these programs. Delays the review of the caps on utility spending from within 30 days of filing the petition to exceed the cap to within 60 days of filing a petition to exceed the cap. It removes certain incentives for on-site clean energy generators. Requires a customer in the pilot program to enroll in utility programs for 4 years instead of 2 under the bill as introduced. Mr. President, the bill passed unanimously out of the committee. I'd move adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, chair recognizes the minority leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Floor leader, yield just for 2 quick questions.
Yes, sir.
Senator may proceed.
You mentioned that there was a cap on utility spending.
Yeah, if you look at the very end of the legislation, and this cap, the Public Service Commission under the bill can review that cap at some point, but the bottom line is, if you look, The cap's limited to 1% of the electric company's approved total revenue requirements up to $15 million. So the cap is essentially $15 million.
$15 million per
total.
Utility. Total or per utility?
Per utility.
Per utility. And then are these expenses, are they expenses to the program, or are they recovered through?
They are recovered. I will make the point that, you know, this model program, which I think is innovative, the thinking here is through learning through this pilot. I'm going to reiterate, this is a pilot program. We're going to learn a lot about load management, demand on the grid, these incentives, et cetera. And so, yes, ratepayers are, there is a socialization of the cost on the front end. The hope here is in the long run, what you're doing is saving tremendous amounts of more money for ratepayers, again, in the long run, as we continue to learn how to electrify our homes, which is where the nation's moving, where our state is moving, consistent with our greenhouse gas emissions goals. And so this is playing the long game, but you're right, in the short run, there is a socialization of these costs that go into rebates, incentives, and by the way, even the utilities have incentives that they can show they're saving money on distribution and energy, et cetera. There's some incentives for them as well to make sure these programs work. But at the end of the day, these programs have to go through the Public Service Commission for approval. We inserted language that these have to be cost effective. There will be periodic Public Service Commission reviews on how the progress of the program is going, but it is a pilot program, and that's the theory here of what we're trying to achieve.
All right, appreciate that. And then finally, just as you mentioned, this is moving towards the goal of electrification. So,
why don't you say a goal? I think the nation's moving that way. I don't think it's a goal. I think it's happening. It's what's happening.
Right. Okay. But in doing so, you're pulling users off of natural gas. I mean, if you're electrifying, you're pulling them off
Sure.
of something.
I mean,
right?
that's right. Again, that's part of a policy goal we've established in this state, and most states are moving there. That we created in the Climate Solutions Act bill last year. Yes. So this is clearly not just to learn how to do it efficiently, to ultimately pay some amount now to learn how to do it better down the road. But yes, this is all part of a national attempt to move away from fossil fuels towards an electrification of electric vehicles, which we've had bills here on the floor dealing with, to everything in the home. And that's where, again, everything's moving.
So with respect to pulling off of natural gas, I know Office of People's Counsel has looked to the PSC for advice on what happens as you have fewer and fewer users on the gas infrastructure, and do rates for those that are left remaining on gas infrastructure skyrocket because there's fewer users to socialize those costs. Does this bill address that, or is the committee doing anything to take a look at what will end up happening to those that cannot get off of gas and are stuck having to pay the infrastructure costs when many are coming off of it?
It's an excellent question. I think the way the bill's constructed, the pilot program's constructed, the Public Service Commission, as it reviews these plans and assesses the data, have to apply cost effectiveness ultimately on ratepayers. So if it's determined that there is those kinds of impacts, I think that would be reflected in whether we would move forward with the pilot program. That's why it's a pilot program. If the costs exceed the benefits, then I assume this pilot program would not be a permanent program. Under the bill, we've extended everything a year, so when we get to 2027, at the end of the 3 years, a decision will be made by the Public Service Commission, utilizing, I think, that criteria in part, determine whether we should move this program to permanent status or get rid of it. So I think it's built into what's contemplated here.
All right. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the minority whip on the amendments.
Thank you,
Got the
Mr.
1-2 punch here.
Mr. President, well, you know, it's sometimes great minds think alike. Just a question that I was two lines of questioning. First, I was looking at the Public Service Commission letter, which is obviously pre-amendment. Did some of the amendments talk about, as drafted, didn't have any cost effectiveness review? You've talked about how that is now part of the amendments.
Correct. So the Public Service Commission's input is reflected in these amendments, timelines, implementation, the times they would need to review and approve. Those have all been pushed back in response to the Public Service Commission's concerns on all those fronts, yes.
Okay, wonderful. And the dollar value per kilowatt hour, all of those.
Exactly.
Okay. Can I ask, just, you talked about how this is a national movement, electrification. One of the challenges, isn't it, with electrification, that we're still getting a lot of, if the concern is fossil fuels, we're still getting a lot of our electricity from around the country anyway, from coal and other types of fossil fuels in the energy generation. What is that still the case in Maryland? I know we have goals we're trying to meet to have more renewables, and certainly we're going to be talking some more about it. One particular type of renewable energy here, I think, in the next day or so, here on the floor. Where are we at with that right now?
Where are we at with what?
With how much is coming from coal and fossil fuels in our electricity generation in Maryland versus renewables?
That's beyond the scope of this specific piece of legislation. I do not have that data in front of me. But, you know, that's a discussion that we're going to have as a nation, as a world. There are economic tensions there. I mean, and so I don't think I can answer that in the scope of this pilot program, Bill. That is a broad macroeconomic, philosophical policy call for the nation as a whole. And I think it's, again, beyond the scope of this particular piece of legislation. What we do know is policies. For example, the Inflation Reduction Act, major piece of legislation, throws unbelievable amounts of money, billions of dollars, into this topic of how do we move from fossil fuels to a nation that is more dependent on electricity. And we're doing, again, with our policies here on cars, and that's a separate bill, but the fact is, that is, again, a broad topic, I think, again, beyond the scope of this 3-year pilot program.
It is true, you would acknowledge, I think that Florida would acknowledge, it's true that we can be electrify all we want, but if we're still, the sources of electricity are still some unreliable renewables and also, or inexpensive renewables, and fossil fuels, we're not really accomplishing the goal. But this seeks to look at how you could electrify. That's the point of this bill, correct? It's just how you would electrify a home.
If we're going to do it, let's do it efficiently. Let's learn how to do it, and that's really, I think, the focus of this bill.
Is there anything in this bill that deals with how we could explore types of electricity generation and energy sources that come from clean, completely clean and very powerful sources like nuclear that could be better accessed? It's interesting to me that the U.S. Navy powers nuclear subs for like 2 years without having to top off the gas tank, but it's like we never really look at that a lot anymore as we look at our energy generation for homes and for some of these electrification needs.
Look, I mentioned cars. The single biggest use at the home is obviously potential charging station situation for our cars. 80 to 90% of folks who have electric vehicles charge at their home. This is part of kind of what we're talking about. So yes, do people still drive cars that are not electric vehicles? Absolutely. Are we moving towards a spot in 2035 like California where the delivery to our dealers is going to be 100% electric vehicles? Yes, that appears to be happening, and it's going to be happening here in Maryland. So again, you're asking some macro questions. I will say that since we've been standing here, nationally at least, 20% of our energy still comes from coal. Maryland is below that number, and we're moving downward. So that's, I don't know if that's responsive to your question.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Mr. President, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, further discussion on the 2 committee amendments. Chair recognizes the Senator from Montgomery County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I actually have a conversation once the amendments are adopted, I believe. So I think we should adopt the amendments. So.
Excellent. Okay. On the amendments, any further discussion? Any objection to the 2 committee amendments? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the after the report is on the report as amended. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Chair recognizes the Senator from Montgomery County.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Sorry, I'm new here. I did want to ask if the floor leader could rise and I could bring it back to the micro for a second.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your really tremendous discussion and explanation.
Senator, do you have an amendment?
Yes, sir.
We just have to get it up and in order to have something to debate.
It is amendment number 453.
Oh, we don't need it.
You
We
don't
just
need that.
actually need the paper.
You need the paper. Okay, sorry,
All
I'm
good.
new here.
No worries. No
New
worries.
here.
Just give us one moment. We're going to get
So
it
we're
loaded
passing
into
it
the
around.
system. One moment.
I can do the small talk now, though, right?
Not really.
Let's wait for the Senate President to acknowledge you.
Okay.
All right. The senator may explain the amendment, and then we'll hear from the floor leader on it, and then we can debate it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President, for teaching me the ways of the Senate. This is a really simple amendment, and I hope it will be considered to be a friendly amendment by the committee. As we heard from the previous discussion, the amended bill did change some of the timelines, and while I think this is an extraordinary bill, and I'm very excited to see that it passed the committee unanimously, there's some provisions in the legislation that deal with something called meter collars and requiring making electric companies to make meter collars available to residential customers. And this is something that's going to make it easier for people to connect solar panels or battery storage in their home, which is really, really wonderful. But my understanding from the electric companies is that they need just a little bit more time to make sure that those meter collars are safe, to review and approve those meter collars. So this amendment is going to change the timeline just slightly to make sure that the electric companies have time to make sure those meter collars don't pose a safety risk, and also requires the utilities to periodically review those new models. Do I move the amendment, or do I?
Senator, Senator moves the amendment.
Thank you. So I move the amendment.
Let's hear from the floor leader.
Yes, this is, I think it's a good amendment, public safety, among other things. It'll be friendly. Thank you. The committee deems it friendly.
Excellent. All right. On the amendment, any further discussion on the amendment? Any objections to the amendment? Without objection, the amendment is adopted. Success. There we go. All right. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 663 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Before we go to the next bill, Senator from District 1, I believe we have some guests in the gallery.
Thank you, Mr. President. Appreciate it. Colleagues, if you would give a warm greetings to the Frostburg State University students who are in the gallery here today.
Welcome.
Welcome and thank you.
Long drive today. Was it an electric bus? No, it's Chair recognizes the senator from the 40th District.
Thank you, Mr. President. I joined my colleague from the 1st District in welcoming the students from Frostburg State University, but also these students are accompanied by one of my favorite professors as an alumni of FSU, Dr. McGrath, who's in the audience with us today as well.
Excellent. Welcome. Welcome. You've done well, Professor. You've done well. All right. Let's go to the clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 713, Chair, Education, Energy, and the Environment Committee, State Board of Architects, Sunset Extension, favorable, one amendment.
Chair recognizes the Vice Chair of the committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. In recent days, we've done a lot of sunset bills. We've had some challenges with the Board of Architects, and we thought about amending the bill to look like the senator from District 40's efforts with the real estate appraisers. We ended up deciding to keep it simple, but rather than giving them a 10-year extension, we do want to have a check-in. So we gave them 5 years, and so we move the favorable report as amended.
All right. The floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment, the favorable committee report. On the committee amendment, any discussion? Any objection? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 713 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. All right, let's stick with education, energy, and the environment. This is report number 20. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 483, Senator Lewis Young, Private Well Safety Act of 2023, favorable with 2 amendments.
Chair recognizes the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. This bill establishes the Private Well Safety Program and the Private Well Safety Fund, administered by the Maryland Department of Environment, which will manage and, subject to the availability of funding, address the contamination of private wells in the state. There are about 1 million of those. The bill also establishes related reporting and outreach requirements, as well as requirements for contracts for the sale of private property. This is enabling legislation. A county may opt into the program, but if an individual resides in a county that does not opt in, they still have an opportunity for testing and remediation of their private well. There are 2 committee amendments. One makes technical changes and adds a co-sponsor. The second amendment alters certain definitions and requires the department's annual well reports to include information about groundwater depletion and groundwater quality. The amendment also provides for information sharing between the Department of Environment, the Department of Health, and local health departments, and it requires the Department of the Environment to conduct a study on long-term funding options for the detailed monitoring and analysis of groundwater resources in the state. Maryland is one of very few states that does not have similar kinds of protections. So I move for the adoption of the committee amendments as well as the favorable committee report.
Floor Leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objection to the 2 committee amendments? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the favorable report as amended. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 483 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 508, Senator Elfreth, Hemp Farming Program, Use of Hemp and Hemp Products and Consumable Products, favorable with 2 amendments.
Chair recognizes the chair of the committee as the floor leader.
Mr. President, just by way of some background, I think this is important to give the chamber a little background. So this piece of legislation should be viewed as complementing the cannabis legalization bill that's currently pending in the Finance Committee, and it arises out of a loophole in the 2018 Farm Bill passed the United States Congress that's being dealt with in all the states that essentially resulted in certain hemp products in its raw form being legal under that federal bill, but when it's processed or synthetically altered, can result in a finished product that has very high THC level and can be very intoxicating. Those products are currently, again, totally unregulated in Maryland, and those products are part of the discussion the Finance Committee's deliberating right now in that piece of legislation. And again, when the cannabis, when that finished product gets above a certain THC level, it's deemed intoxicating, and that is the subject of that bill, which would be regulated by the Cannabis Commission, similar to the way marijuana is dealt with. That's, again, a discussion for the Finance Committee. By contrast, this bill is not in that lane. It establishes a framework for regulating non-intoxicating consumable finished hemp product that are under those same THC levels. So this is a different product. We're talking about products produced within the hemp farming program subject to rules under the Department of Agriculture. What this bill essentially does, in a nutshell, is, as amended, 508 establishes a framework for regulating these non-intoxicating consumable hemp products under the hemp farming program. We want to make sure these products are properly tested within that separate regulatory regime. The amended bill establishes maximum THC concentrations for consumable hemp products, again, consistent with the definitions in the bill pending in the Finance Committee. It requires THC levels in consumable hemp products be tested and verified by state-authorized cannabis or hemp testing laboratories. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 strikes language of the bill that would have altered the definitions of hemp and hemp product for purposes of the hemp farming program, as well as language that would have allowed for the dilution of hemp products that exceeded certain maximum THC concentrations. The amendment also alters the THC limits for consumer hemp products to be based on milligrams per serving and milligrams per package rather than a dry weight percentage. The bill passed unanimously. Again, this is a separate product, non-intoxicating, below the THC levels contemplated in the other piece of legislation. And so with that, Mr. President, I'd move adoption of the 2 committee amendments in the favorable committee report.
All right. The floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments in the favorable committee report. Chair recognizes the minority whip.
I wonder if the chairman would yield for a question.
Senator, you may proceed.
I'm familiar with everything you're talking about, more familiar than I was like a week ago, to be honest, because I've been talking about this issue with a lot of folks that have come to see me, including constituents, and I think the aim of the bill is very good, so definitely want to get some regulation. Can I understand, is this going to capture, my understanding is, and I'm going to be very layman's terms here, there are people who farm hemp and produce products that, other than a small amount of THC, there's no intoxication, and there's only a small amount of THC, not enough to be intoxicating.
Correct.
And and they produce CBD, real CBD. Then there is the Delta 8, and there's a concern that sometimes that is portrayed as CBD, but it has high THC, so it's not technically what's considered for the recreational marijuana, but because there's kind of an issue with that. Does this deal with both of those, or with just the hemp farm?
In the intoxicating, once you're getting into the intoxicating THC numbers, that is a subject for the Cannabis Commission, regulation, testing, that's part of the Delta 8. That's a Finance Committee issue. Right. This is dealing with the THC levels below those numbers, but we want to make sure they're actually below those numbers. And, so it's right now, it's sort of unregulated gray zone area. We want to make sure that those products are also tested to make sure that they're under that intoxicating number level, and that's within the purview of the farm program, and the Department of Agriculture. So I'm trying to draw this line here between these products and what's clearly within the purview of the Finance Committee in Senate Bill 516.
Thank you.
But right now, we're silent, so we don't have anything for these products, these hemp products.
Thank you. And I was not rising out of any sort of professional jealousy, actually. I just was curious, because I think we actually want to look at that the Delta 8 stuff. We're looking at it all, I know. Right. But so I'm just being clear. This will help our farmers that are farming hemp and producing these types of CBD products that are not intoxicating. And that's what this bill is aimed at. And this will help provide some definition.
Well, correct. I mean, I'm respectful of the work of the Finance Committee, so this is very specifically below the THC numbers that are the subject of the, so it's complementary, and again, it's not even the same regulatory entity. That's a topic that potentially you're talking about would be regulated by the Cannabis Commission. This is within the purview of the Ag Department currently, the farm program.
Okay. So I'm going to ask to lay the bill over. I just am laying it over because some of us want to read it. I totally agree with the aims of it. We want to help these folks out. So just making that clear before I ask if we could have the bill and the amendment live under the rule.
Okay, and also just say I want everything to be consistent here with the work of the Finance Committee, and so that's perfectly appropriate.
All right, the Senator's amendment is in order. The bill and the amendment will lay over under the rule. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 741, Senator Jackson, Public Safety, Refrigerants, Limitations on Use, favorable with 2 options.
Chair recognizes the Senator from District 10 as the floor leader.
Thanks, Mr. President. And if I may give just a little context on the bill, for those individuals who had vehicles manufactured before 1995, you use R12 refrigerant in the car, and then that was called difluoromethane. And in your appliance at home or your air conditioning unit, you would use R22. Well, that was accused of being depleting the ozone layer. So then we went to the federal government sent us to R134, and that's the refrigerant that's being used now. Senate Bill 741, the bill establishes that notwithstanding any other law, regulations, or requirements in the state, the use of a refrigerant may not be prohibited or otherwise limited if, 1, the refrigerant is designated as acceptable for the use in accordance with specified provisions of the Federal Clean Air Act, and 2, Any appliance containing the refrigerant designated for acceptable use is installed and used in accordance with the federal safety standards and use conditions. There are two committee amendments. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 limits the bill to refrigerants identified under the Environmental Protection Agency's significant new alternative policy, and specifies that the bill does not prohibit the Maryland Department of Environment from adopting regulations prohibiting the use of the refrigerants. Mr. President, move the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objection? Oh, yes, Chair recognizes the senator from the 37th District on the amendments.
Yeah, what refrigerant is would be prohibited?
Question for the floor leader.
Mr. President, may I ask a question for the floor leader?
Senator appears to yield, so Senator may proceed.
Yeah, what refrigerant would be prohibited by this legislation?
It would be R12 if your vehicle was produced after 1995. Now you would use R134A.
So we're going from R12 to R134.
Yes.
Can R134 be utilized in existing appliances?
Yeah, R134 would be used in your refrigerator or your air conditioning unit, yes.
And when do we go to the previous number? I'm sorry, I've got my learning disabilities kicking in. R35, what we're going from and to, when do we go to where we were?
Okay, we're going from R12 to R134A. That's in your vehicle, automobiles. And then we're going from R22 to R134 in your appliances and air conditioning units.
And when did we go to R12? Was that in the last 10 years?
1996 is when we left R12. We went to R134 in 1996.
And what was the name of the refrigerant used before R12?
Before R12, I would have to do some research on that, but I do know R12 is, is dichloride difluoromethane.
So any devices that are currently being used, if we go to this next level of refrigerant, would that refrigerant still be able to be utilized in older appliances and devices?
Yeah, you would have to use you're prohibited from using R134 in an R12 unit. So it would have to use the refrigerant that was dedicated to that unit prior to the transition after 1995.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't think I want to ask for a special order or layover or anything like that. He's answered. My questions have been answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Sure. All right. On the amendments, any further discussion? If not, any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 741 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 823, Senator Carrozza, Natural Resources Annual State Park Pass Discounts for Law Enforcement Officers and First Responders, favorable with one amendment.
Chair recognizes the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I think we learned during COVID that access to the outdoors was both great for our health and well-being. And so SB 823 requires that the Department of Natural Resources provides a discount of at least $40 on the annual state park passes for our first responders and law enforcement officers who are Maryland residents. As a reminder, an annual state park pass is a pass issued by the Department of Natural Resources that allows the holder unlimited day use entry to all state parks and the state park facilities for 1 year. There is one committee amendment that adds co-sponsors, and I move for adoption of the amendment and a favorable committee report.
Thank you for this bill, sir. I had no idea that even existed. I'm going to have to look into that. All right. The floor leader moves to the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 823 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 830, Senator Hester, Environmental Health Specialist and On-Site Sewage Disposal Systems Reform Environmental Health Systems Support Act of 2023, favorable to amendments.
Chair recognizes the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. As amended, Senate Bill 830 requires 2 studies related to our local health environmental specialists and well and septic system permitting processes. The amended bill requires the Maryland Department of the Environment and the Maryland Department of Health, in conjunction with the Board of Environmental Health Specialists, to conduct a study on staffing needs for environmental health specialists in local health departments. The Maryland Department of the Environment, in consultation with the Department of Legislative Services, must also study the implications of the delegation of the Department of the Environment's authority related to well and septic system permitting to the Department of Health. There are 2 committee amendments. The first one is technical. The second one strikes the language that would have established an environmental health specialist student loan assistance repayment program, require the development of an online tracking system for septic system permit applications, and mandated new positions within the Department of the Environment. The amendment also alters requirements for the specified studies and extends the bill's termination date. I'd like to move the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections with the 2 committee amendments? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the favorable report as amended. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 830 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 836, Senator Brooks, Maryland Native Plants Program, favorable to amendments.
Chair recognizes Senator from District 10 as the floor leader.
Thanks, Mr. President. Senate Bill 836 establishes the Maryland Native Plant Program to, among other things, develop a commercial Maryland native plant list and create a voluntary certification program for growers and retailers, and a Maryland native marketing program, and a Maryland native plant webpage. There are 2 committee amendments. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 transfers primary responsibility from administering the program from the University of Maryland Extension to the Maryland Department of Agriculture, and authorizes the inclusion of cultivars and hybrids of native plants in the commercial Maryland native plant list under certain circumstances. The amendment also establishes a $250,000 mandatory appropriations to support the program. Mr. President, move the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and a favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 836 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. We'll go to report number 21. Before we do, we would just want to welcome, it looks like some additional students from Frostburg State have joined us, and so welcome to the Senate. Hopefully you enjoy your stay here. Welcome. If we give them a warm Senate welcome. We've got an interesting bill coming up. Hopefully you'll enjoy the description of. Clerk, read the bill.
Senate Bill 781, Senator Hester, Offshore Wind Energy State Goals and Procurement Promoting Offshore Wind Energy Resources Act, favorable to amendments.
Chair recognizes the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you again, Mr. President. Colleagues, good morning on this sunny and windy day. This body has talked a lot about the existential climate change that is posed to the entire world. I represent Ellicott City, which has had 2 1,000-year floods within 18 months. To address the climate crisis and meet our greenhouse gas reduction goals from the Climate Solutions Act of 22, we must take a comprehensive approach to decarbonization and electrification. Offshore wind is a vital component of diverse energy generation. However, the benefits of offshore wind go far beyond greenhouse gas reductions and include many economic benefits. The POWER Act has the potential to spur billions of dollars in investment in manufacturing and the green economy, creating thousands of family-sustaining jobs right here in Maryland. Colleagues, Maryland has been an early leader in offshore wind generation targets. However, we have been eclipsed by other states along the eastern seaboard in the past 8 years. So the Power Act sets us up again to lead once more. Specifically, this bill does 3 things. First, the bill sets an ambitious new target for offshore wind energy generation of 8.5 gigawatts to indicate our interest to the Federal Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. By signaling our willingness to purchase the generated energy, we will gain greater influence over how and where these lease areas are developed. Second, the bill opens up a competitive transmission planning process, which will improve efficiency and ultimately save Marylanders money. This bill requires the Public Service Commission to conduct an analysis of specified offshore wind transmission system expansion options, issue competitive solicitations for proposals, develop evaluation criteria, and then evaluate and potentially accept 1 or more proposals. Finally, this bill establishes a novel procurement process for the state to lock in long-term, lower rates for offshore wind generation. The Department of General Services must issue an invitation for bids and may enter into at least 1 long-term contract for a power purchase agreement to procure between 1 million and 8 million megawatt hours annually of offshore wind energy and associated renewable energy credits. Community benefit agreement requirements for future offshore wind projects are modified, and those requirements apply to transmission projects proposals under the bill. There are 2 amendments. The first one makes technical changes. Amendment number 2 requires the PSC to request PJM interconnection to conduct the analysis, authorizes PJM to solicit, evaluate, or modify proposals for transmission projects, alters the reporting date for the study, requires factors necessary for a CPCN to be included in a proposal instead of requiring a CPCN be issued, extends the deadline for which proposals are due and may be selected, requires cost-benefit analyses to be included as a factor in the proposals, and authorizes the refusal of proposals based on the results of a cost-benefit analysis. The amendment expands community benefit agreement protections and establishes labor peace protections for proposals and energy procurement. It requires DGS to consult with the PSC in procuring energy and modifies the amount of energy to be procured and the procurement method. It modifies the deadline for entering into procurement contracts, requires a report on small minority women-owned and veteran-owned contractors, authorizes $3.5 million for consultant fees, and authorizes the establishment of 4 positions in the Public Service Commission. Mr. President, I move that the bill and the amendments lay over under the rule until the next legislative day.
All right. The floor leader has moved the 2 committee amendments in the favorable committee report and has moved to lay the bill over under the rule. The motion's in order, and the bill will lay over under the rule. Complicated bill. We'll have lots of conversation about this one tomorrow. All right. Clerk will read the... Oh, that's it on that calendar. We've got Budget and Tax, report number 13. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 559, Senator Gazzone, jointly considered B&T EEE, Education, Maryland Meals for Achievement in Classroom Breakfast Program, Annual Appropriation, favorable with 1 amendment.
Chair recognizes Chair of the Committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This Maryland Meals for Achievement program has been around since 1998 and been very successful in our schools. One of the things, though, unfortunately, that hasn't happened, there hasn't been enough money to cover all the eligible schools that are out there. If a school is at 40% free and reduced lunch, it's eligible for the program. This is to give breakfast after the bell in the school. It's one of a couple bills that we had this year that deal with providing more lunches in the school system. This one unfortunately, there are about 600 schools that actually have been taking advantage of this over the years, but there's about 125 that are eligible that have not received. All this does is provide the funding gap for those years. As you know, we take every one of these bills and look at it carefully about whether or not it should be a mandate. This is a $4.5 million increase, and it is a mandate. The committee considered it very carefully and thought it was appropriate and important enough that it needed to remain that way. There is one amendment, and I believe it's just, it just adds sponsors from our committee and the EEE committee. Move the amendment and the favorable report.
All right, the floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 559 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 561, Senator Gazzone, Goodwill Industries of Chesapeake, Excel Center in Baltimore City, alterations favorable.
Chair recognizes the chair of the committee. The floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. You may remember that we've had this bill come forward a couple times. We actually got it through last year all the way. This is basically to help these Goodwill Industries create this Excel Center to help individuals who, adults who want to complete their high school diploma. All this bill does is very simple. There was some confusion in the naming of it all last year, so this is really more a technical correction. Move the favorable report.
All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 561 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 756, Senator Gazzone, access to counsel and evictions, funding favorable with two amendments.
Chair recognizes the chair of the committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, as we all know, the evictions issue has been a very strong and important one that we've had to consider over the last couple of years. There has been a lot of federal money that we have used over the years for several purposes. A bulk of tens of millions of dollars that went to actually helping folks prevent actual evictions from even occurring, which helped both the tenants and the landlords. This year, that money is not there. And we decided that even though there is a dramatic need for that still, the estimates were up to $171 million that might be needed to continue that kind of program. As much as we looked at it, much as we thought it might be valuable, it's just not something that we can afford at this time. However, a program that we started back in 23 and is funded completely for 24 at the $14 million that this bill is, was to provide Maryland Legal Services the opportunity to provide that service of representation for those who are in the process of being evicted. And of course, we passed that last year in 24, and it is funded in this budget. It ended there. And when this bill came in, when I brought this bill in, I originally thought that we would keep it going for indefinitely. But again, upon consideration of mandates and such, there is an amendment that we limited it to through fiscal 27. I think it's an important component as we consider these issues and we consider the eviction problem over the next several years. I would move the bill and the two amendments.
All right. Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the favorable committee report as amended. Chair recognizes the senator from the 42nd District on the report.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've always been in favor of providing counsel for people in these situations. I didn't really understand the explanation. Are we terminating that program now? Or are we going to continue it? Or what's going to happen?
No, at the moment it is terminated. In other words, it's only funded through 24.
Right.
This bill extends it from 25 to 27.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any further discussion on the report? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 756 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. All right, we've got judicial proceedings. Report number 13, Clerk, read the first bill.
Senate Bill 391, Senator Lewis Young, Criminal Procedure Victims of Sexually Assaultive Behavior, favorable.
Chair recognizes the Senator from Montgomery County as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill, simple bill, it requires an assistant state's attorney to meet with a victim of sexually assaultive behavior at the request of the victim after a decision has been made by the office of the state's attorney not to file a charging document against the alleged suspect or to dismiss charges against the suspect within 20 days of the request. Move the adoption, no amendments on this bill, move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 391 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 428, Washington County Senators, Washington County Deputy Sheriffs and Correctional Deputies, Employment Conditions and Collective Bargaining, favorable.
Chair recognizes the Senator from Western Maryland as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now, Senate Bill 428 is a local collective bargaining bill for the deputy sheriffs and correctional deputies. Colleagues, there were no amendments. It passed unanimously favorable. Therefore, Mr. President, I urge an adoption of a favorable committee report for Senate Bill 428.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 428 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 462, Senator Fulden, Frederick County Sheriff, salary, favorable.
Chair recognizes the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 462, the bill alters the annual salary of the Frederick County Sheriff by establishing that the salary is equal to the salary of a lieutenant colonel in the Department of the Maryland State Police at the highest available step that is in effect on the day prior to the day that the sheriff begins a term of office. Any change to the Department of State Police's salary schedule during a term of office may not apply to the incumbent sheriff, but the changed rate takes effect at the beginning of the next term. Pursuant to constitutional requirements, the salary structure specified in the bill takes effect at the beginning of the next term of office. There are no committee amendments. Unanimously passed favorable out of committee. Mr. President, I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 462 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 615, Senator Heddleman, Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth and Victim Services, Sexual Assault Evidence Collection Kit Reporting Program, favorable.
Chair recognizes the Senator from the 34th District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill in the main requires that the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth and Victim Services should establish and administer a reporting and tracking program for sexual assault evidence collection kits. There are some related requirements for law enforcement and others that control the kits, for the Governor's Office to adopt related regulations, and for clarification that an existing rape kit testing grant can be used to pay to have the kits tested. There were no amendments, no opposition, unanimous support. I move for our favorable adoption of the committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 615 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 685, Senator Waldstreicher, Vehicle Laws, Autonomous Vehicle Converters, Sale of Autonomous Vehicles, favorable.
Chair recognizes the Vice Chair of the Committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, the U.S. military or businesses don't want to purchase automated vehicles from an automated vehicle manufacturer. They want to purchase off-the-shelf vehicles that are then made automated by some of our innovative Maryland businesses. So this bill authorizes an autonomous vehicle converter to sell, transfer, lease, offer for sale, or resell a converted autonomous vehicle. The bill only applies to motor vehicles intended for commercial or industrial use. An autonomous vehicle converter may not be licensed as a vehicle manufacturer, distributor, or a factory branch, or as a dealer. There are no committee amendments. Mr. President, I move the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 685 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 748, Senator Folden, Vehicle Laws, Military Vehicles, Registration, and Operation favorable.
Chair recognizes the bill sponsors the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 748, the bill establishes standards and procedures for registering of retired military vehicles, which must meet specified criteria and may be operated only for limited purposes. The bill requires all vehicles that meet these criteria to be registered as a Class MV-C military vehicle collector's vehicles and establishes a one-time $51 registration fee. There are no committee amendments, unanimously passed with a favorable report from the committee, and Mr. President, I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Chair recognizes the senator from the 32nd district on the report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the floor leader yield, please?
Senator may will the floor leader yield?
Yeah,
Senator may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Floor Leader. So, I was reviewing the bill. I don't see any insurance requirements. Are we sure these vehicles can be insured?
Yeah, they can be insured just like any other vehicle.
And we're sure that there's companies that will insure them because they're going on the road now where they could, damage other property.
Sure, and if they are not insurable, they're obviously not able to be operated, but they are insurable vehicles. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. President, can I ask to hold the bill for a little further investigation, maybe till tomorrow?
Any objections to special order the bill for a day?
No, that's fine, Mr. President.
All right.
Thank you.
Without objection, the bill will be special ordered to the appropriate time tomorrow. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 769, Senator Carter, Baltimore City Residential Real Property, Disclaimed Property, and Exemptions from Prepayment favorable.
Chair recognizes the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill is a local bill that authorizes Baltimore City to acquire title to residential real property located in Baltimore City if it has been disclaimed from a decedent's estate and disclaimed interest under the Maryland Uniform Disclaimer of Property Interest Act. The bill also exempts certain transfers of property, specifically transfers of residential real property to an heir to an estate who enters into a tax payment plan with Baltimore City Bureau of Revenue Collections or to the city pursuant to the authority under the bill to acquire title to the disclaimed residential real property. There are no committee amendments. The bill was voted unanimously in delegation as well as committee. I would move for the adoption of a favorable committee report.
All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any object? Oh, excuse me. If there's no discussion, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 769 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Let's do a quorum call before third reading calendar.
Mr. President?
And Madam Secretary, if we could ring the bells quickly. All right, the clerk will take the call. With 46 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland remains in session. We have third reading calendar number 26. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 291, Senator Carter, Courts, Prohibited Liability Agreements, Recreational Facilities.
Senate Bill 291 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote. If not, the clerk will take the call. With 40 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 291 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 335, Senator King, Real Property Unlawfully Restrictive Covenants Modification by Counties or Municipalities.
Senate Bill 335 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote. If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 335 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 336, Senator Bailey, Water Right Incident Notification Systems WINS Work Group.
Senate Bill 336 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote. If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 336 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 693, Senator Waldstreicher, Transportation Assaults on Public Transit Operators Report.
Senate Bill 693 is on third reading for final passage. Chair recognizes the Senator from 42nd District on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just thought I'd speak for a moment on this. You'll recall, the body will recall that a couple of days ago I voted against Senate Bill 1 and explained my rationale is because it was unconstitutional. And I'm not going to vote for a bill which I find unconstitutional. This bill was in a similar posture when it was introduced, and I plan to vote.
Senator, I think it might be the next one.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries.
Okay.
No worries.
To be continued.
I was kind of wondering what the transit worker. All right. No worries. No worries. We were moving quickly. All right. Senate Bill 693 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. Oh, sorry. On the next bill. All right, clerk, read the next bill.
Mr. President.
Oh, yes. Senator from 29th District.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to be recorded from green to red on Senate Bill 291.
No problem. Are there any objections? Without objections, so ordered. We'll generally do it at the end of the calendar. Let's do it after the end of the calendar. Read the next bill, please, Madam Clerk.
Senate Bill 858, Senator Smith, Firearm Safety, Storage Requirements, and Youth Suicide Prevention, Dalen's Law.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 42nd District. I think may have a thought.
I'm afraid my face is a little red at this point. So, as I started to say, the other day I voted against Senate Bill 1 because I thought it was unconstitutional, and I won't vote for an unconstitutional bill. This bill started in the same posture. But then our committee took control of this bill and went into the back room. We had a rotating group of members of our committee in the back room, along with the president of Maryland Shall Issue, one of the state's leading Second Amendment organizations, as well as one of the leading advocates for bills of this type. Let's just say the advocate for Maryland Shall Issue and the other advocate were not in agreement when we started. We had to thread a very narrow needle between the intent of this bill and the U.S. Constitution. I believe we did it. As we finally concluded with the bill, I think we have drawn an acceptable balance between the Constitution and what the advocates wanted, and we're close enough to the Constitution, and we're not exactly on point, but we're darned close. The Constitution uses the word immediately, and we use the words readily available, which is not exactly the same, but for me is close enough. I think it's a reasonable stretch to suggest this bill is constitutional. So even though I voted against the bill in committee when we didn't have the amendment in front of us, in final form, I intend to vote in favor of the bill today. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Any further discussion on the bill? Chair recognizes the Senator from District 1.
Thank you, Mr. President. My colleague, who I serve on JPR and sit behind, made some very, very good points, and therefore I plan to vote green for this bill as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Senator. All right, on the bill, any further discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote. Chair recognizes Chair of the committee has 2 minutes to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just want a point of clarification. I respect and thank the senator for his compliments, but during all of those meetings, all Open Meetings Act requirements were adhered to, and we're all legal. So just want to make that point of clarification. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Fair point. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right. Any further senators wish to explain their vote? Chair recognizes the senator from District 4 has 2 minutes to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise in support of this after the original crafting of it, not supporting it, and we've done a lot of work on Senate Bill 1, and we've done a lot of work on this. And this bill simply is about responsible gun ownership. And if you're going to have that gun, and you're going to have it in an area that's accessible by others, this is responsible gun ownership. This is what everyone should be advocating for. I do not see this bill as anything other than that. And with that, I'll be casting a green vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the senator from the 37th District has 2 minutes to explain.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a red vote up there, and I appreciate the work that's been done on this legislation. However, right now we have laws in place, and those laws in place are sufficient for responsible, safe firearm ownership. I understand there's been changes that balance this legislation out. However, it can be seen as another opportunity to make a lawful gun owner unlawful. For that reason, and that reason alone, I have a red vote. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Senator. Any further senators wish to explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 36 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 858, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. All right, I think we have some vote changes. Yes, Chair recognizes the minority whip.
You know, Mr. President, normally I feel very strongly that I'm right, but in this case I did make a mistake. Hit the wrong button on Senate Bill 291, like to be green to red. 291,
green to red. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Senator from the 29th.
Thank you, Mr. President. On Senate Bill 291 from green to red.
291, green to red. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 291, green to red. If we can make sure when we set up these calendars, we start off with the easy ones.
Right, yes, fair enough. They're all easy. They're all easy. Just vote green. That's it. All right, green to red. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Senator from District 4.
Thank you, Mr. President. Apparently, I was advised that my vote on Senate Bill 693 was red. It was meant to be green.
693.
Yes, sir.
All right, from red to green. Excellent. All right. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Any others? All right. The desk is clear. The desk is clear. Now, there's a lot of reports coming today that we're anticipating an afternoon session, but I think committees are going to need a little bit more time. So we will not do a double session today, and we'll have committee work for the afternoon. So if chairs want to do voting after committee, today would probably be the good one. We will 98% positive have a double session tomorrow. So just keep that in mind as we're scheduling the day. If there's ways to get anything done in committees earlier, that would be ideal. So let's check with the Chair of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Finance will meet at 1 p.m. for bill hearings in the committee room, followed by a voting session.
All right. Chair of Education, Energy, and the Environment.
Thank you, Mr. President. EEE Committee will meet at 1 p.m. for bill hearings, immediately followed by a voting session.
Thank you. Chair of Budget and Tax.
Thank you, Mr. President. A little complicated, but today is the first peek at some of the budget with the subcommittees reporting out. So at 1 o'clock, Public Safety, at 1:15, Education at 1:45, Health, and at 2:30, PAYGO Capital. And then after that, at 3 o'clock, we're going to have bill hearings.
All right. Thank you. Chair of Judicial Proceedings.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Judicial Proceedings Committee will meet today at 1:30 for bill hearings, followed by a voting session.
All right. Thank you. Any additional standing committees, select committees, delegations, caucuses? Yes, Chair of the Veterans Caucus. Nope, Prince George's.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Prince George's delegation, 5 o'clock in the Neal room. 5 o'clock. Thank you.
All right. Any further? Yes, Senator from the 35th District.
If I'm not too late, could I have that vote changed on 291 from green
291,
to red? Green to red, please.
From green to red. Any objections there? Without objection, so ordered. Senator from District 7.
I don't be the only one. 291, green to red.
Green to red. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Veterans Caucus tomorrow morning, 8:30. We have a very important briefing tomorrow morning, 8:30. The link should be on your computer. 8:30. Please be prompt. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Any further business before? Yes.
I'm sorry, Mr. President. I'm not sure who to blame this on, but pensions tomorrow morning at 9:30.
Pensions at
9:30.
9:30.
Thank you very much.
All right. Busy day. All right. Anything else? Anything else? Going once, going twice. All right. Let's do a quorum call before we adjourn.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. With 46 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland remains in session. Chair recognizes the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate of Maryland stand adjourned until Thursday, March 16th at 10 a.m.
Without objection, so ordered. Have a phenomenal day.
You are violent.